Hello, everyone, and greetings from Baltimore, Maryland, the home of the Peabody Institute at the Johns Hopkins University. My name is Abra Bush, and I'm the Senior Associate Dean of Institute Studies. I'm delighted that you could join us today for Recording and Electronic Tools for Musicians, the sixth in our series of summer lunch and learn events focused on the challenges and opportunities of remote instruction for music. A special thanks goes to the academic leadership at many of the conservatories and schools of music in the United States and the United Kingdom for their support for this series. They graciously supported my crazy idea and recommended a list of presenters who do excellent work in the area of remote and online pedagogy. Before we get started, I would like to thank several Peabody staff members who are joining us today and supporting this event. Adam Scalici from Peabody's production team will be in the background monitoring the webinar and working through any technical challenges we may have. Please send any technical challenges directly to Adam in the chat. Patrick Wallen from the Dean's Office, Christina Mansior, and Zane Forshee from Peabody's Launchpad will provide additional support and help me curate your questions. A very special thank you to each of them. A few quick notes before we begin. Please hop into the chat and introduce yourselves. We'd love to hear from you and hope that you'll consider this an interactive session in the chat. Be sure you send your introduction to all panelists and attendees. The presenters will spend about half the session on their presentations, after which we will reserve the remainder of the time for questions and comments from you. Please place your questions into the Q&A area of the webinar. And again, we will curate those questions and ask them of the presenters. Should you have any technical difficulties, once again, just let Adam know and he'll help you out. The presenters have agreed to allow us to record this webinar. Thank you to them for that. This session will be posted to the Peabody Keep Teaching website within 1 to 2 business days, should you wish to refer to it again or share it. And now I'm very pleased to welcome our guest presenters for today. Scott Metcalfe serves as Chair of Music Engineering and Technology and Director of Peabody's Recording Arts and Sciences program. Ed Tetreault is manager of Peabody's Recording Arts and Sciences program, and Dan Rorke is chief recording engineer at the Manhattan School of Music and a proud Peabody alum. Their full biographies may be found on the Peabody Keep Teaching website. Dan will begin our presentation today, and so I am very pleased to turn it directly over to him. Dan?
Thank you so much, Abra. It's great to be virtually back at Peabody here. And I want to thank Peabody for giving me this opportunity today to take part in this discussion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick things off by talking about how to improve Zoom audio with microphones. And I'm going to start by talking about microphone placement. And then I'm going to go into some specific recommendations as to USB microphones you can use that will work well in the current predicament that we find ourselves here. And so when we talk about microphone placement, one of the things I want to talk about first is microphone directionality. And microphone directionality is a microphone's sensitivity to picking up sound from different directions. So you can see up here is I have 3 different microphone directionalities that are commonly found in microphones. And we've referred to these as the polar pattern of the microphone. And so here in the top left, I have an omnidirectional microphone, and it gets its name because it picks up sound from all sides. Omnidirectionals are used a lot by classical recording engineers. And one of the reasons for this is that it's not only going to capture the ensemble, but it's also going to capture a lot of the acoustic of the room and the space that you're in. And since classical recordings take place in concert halls and cathedrals and generally places that have really nice acoustics, omnidirectionals are employed often. But now we find ourselves recording at home. And I don't have a concert hall at home. I'm currently in my kitchen right now. And an omnidirectional microphone might not be the best choice in my kitchen. As you can see, what it's going to do is it's going to pick up the direct sound, but it's also going to get a lot of these reflections that are bouncing off the floor, off the ceiling, off the back wall. And those reflections are going to combine with that direct sound in a really unflattering way. And so an improvement to this would be to pick a directional microphone like a cardioid, as you can see here in the center panel. The cardioid gets its name from sort of the heart-shaped polar pattern you can see. Another term for this is a unidirectional microphone. It'll pick up sound from the front while rejecting sound from the back. That area of rejection in a directional microphone can be referred to as the null spot. And null spots are incredibly useful with microphones because we can aim the null spot at things we don't want in our recording. So not only is the cardioid going to pick up less of the room, which is going to give us a more direct and accurate sound, We can also use the Null Spot to get rid of, say, unwanted street noise. I know some of us might be in New York City, and maybe there's a lot of street noise. You have a window, maybe you have a lot of glass in your room that creates some sort of unflattering reflections. You can use the Null Spot to sort of eliminate those unwanted sounds in your recording. On the right-hand side, we have another directional type of microphone called a figure 8. This is sometimes referred to as a bidirectional microphone because it picks up sound from the back and the front equally, but rejects sounds from the top and sides. This can be really useful for duets. You can put musicians one on either side and it's going to capture them equally. Another common scenario is that vocalists right now might be trying to play or sing along to a pre-recorded piano track. And so what you can do is you set the vocalist on one side, set up the speaker on the other, put a figure 8 in between, and then by adjusting how close that microphone is to the vocalist or the speaker, you can balance the two really well. Now, some microphones are just a fixed polar pattern. So later on, I'll talk about like the Audio-Technica USB microphones. They're just fixed cardioid. Other microphones we refer to as multi-pattern microphones. You can see in the bottom right here, I have the Blue Yeti USB microphone, another very popular type of microphone. And in the back, you're going to see a dial there where you can actually switch between these different polar patterns depending on what the situation you're in. Now, before you go home and you say that the Peabody panel told you to throw away all of your omnidirectional microphones, I'm going to contradict what I said earlier. I think that there's actually a use case for omnidirectionals, and that's when recording sometimes low-frequency instruments. So directional microphones have this effect called proximity effect, where if you move a directional microphone like a cardioid or a figure 8 closer to a sound source, you're going to start to artificially increase the bass. Sometimes this is referred to as bass boost. Now, this is neither a good or a bad thing. It can be a bad thing on certain instruments, say like upright bass, sometimes an electric bass amp or a cello, even like a guitar, because you put that directional microphone close to it and it just starts to sound boomy and really muddy. In those instances, sometimes you might get a more accurate bass response by just using an omnidirectional up close, and regardless of the distance of that microphone, it should capture an accurate sound. Now, on the other hand, we can use proximity effect to great effect creatively to sort of make ourselves sound more rich and more resonant. I think a common scenario is to use large diaphragm cardioid condensers, for instance, on horn sections in jazz ensembles. Because you can put that cardioid condenser really close, it's going to sort of reject the drums and other things that are bleeding into it, but it's also going to, that proximity effect is going to warm up the sound and make you sound sort of larger than life. It's definitely something to be aware of when you're using unidirectional microphones, and it's something you should play with distance. So now I'm going to get into specific USB microphone recommendations here. Right here we have the Audio-Technica 2020 and the 2500X. These are great USB microphones. They're super simple. Plug and play, and you should be good. You should be going on your way. They're cardioid condenser microphones, so they're great if you just want to capture a single instrument and you're not worried about recording ensembles or anything like that. Here's another microphone that many of us might already be aware of. It's the Zoom H1N. And unlike the Audio-Technica, this is a stereo microphone. And what you do is you take two cardioid microphones, it places them coincidentally, which means on top of one another, in a 90-degree orientation. This is referred to as an XY configuration, and it's sort of a fancy way of saying you're taking two mics and pointing one to the left and one to the right. You can see on the left side here how the polar patterns of those two cardioids overlap. And what it's going to do is in that overlapping section in the front, it's going to sort of emphasize what's in front. So ideally you'd put the musical ensemble in front of this microphone still. You're going to pick up a lot of acoustics still with a stereo microphone. So unlike just a pure cardioid like the Audio-Technica, this will get more room. So if you're looking for a more focused sound, this probably wouldn't be the choice here. There's some really cool settings on the Zoom H1N, and one of the reasons I like it is that it works as a standalone recorder as well as a USB microphone, and therefore I think it's going to be very useful even after the current pandemic ends for anyone who's looking to just record themselves, record their rehearsals. It's a great little device. You can set the audio sample rate and bit depth by cycling through that leftmost audio button on the picture on the right-hand side. By the way, I recommend 48 kilohertz as a sample rate. It's the sort of traditional standard for audio and video. And since so much of what we're doing now includes video, 48 kilohertz is just a good default setting to remain on. Next to that, you have the low cut button. And this is a really useful feature in certain circumstances because it's going to filter out low frequencies, which you can use to filter out like rumble or any vibrations that might be getting into the microphone that are causing some low frequency noise. Say you live near like a subway track in New York, every time the subway goes by, your whole room shakes, you're probably going to want to use this. If you're a high frequency instrument player like a violin or a flute player or soprano, feel free to engage this and it should help clean up your recordings. If you're a low frequency player like a bass player, obviously you're going to want to leave this off. This last mic I want to talk about here is a really interesting one. It's the Shure MV88, and it's for iPhone and iPad. For those of you who out there who might not want to be using a computer, this would be a great choice if you're using your iPhone or iPad. It's also a stereo microphone, just like the Zoom H1N, but it is not an XY. It's actually a really interesting pattern that we call a mid-side or an MS. In this case, what you have is you have a front-facing center cardioid microphone that you point directly at the sound source. And then you have this sideways facing figure 8. And that seems kind of strange, right? So why would I take a microphone and point the null pattern at the thing I'm trying to record? Well, what's going to happen is this figure 8 is going to pick up the acoustic environment. It's going to pick up the reverb of any space you're in, whereas that center channel is going to get the direct sound. And then what you can do is you can blend these two to however you like. And so if you want a more direct sound, you can favor that center cardioid. If you want to include more room, more stereo imaging, you can start to increase that figure 8 microphone. You can see here on the left side, I have a screenshot. This is the app that controls this microphone. You can download this app. It's free. It's actually a great recording app, even if you don't own this microphone. But you can see here for the MV88 that it has a stereo width option. And then you can control by increasing or decreasing that stereo width. You can collapse it entirely to mono, in which case it's just going to use that center cardioid. Or you can increase the stereo width right up. You can also control things like mic gain. It has a nice set of meters, which sometimes can be kind of uncommon in consumer gear. There's also limiters, EQs, things like that if you're interested in processing your sound at all. This is a great, extremely versatile microphone, and I could spend a lot of time talking about it, but I put more information in the end if you want to read up on mid-side or how to use this microphone. So the last thing I want to talk about before handing things off to Ed is microphone gain, input volume. So let's say you've got your USB microphone, you're set up, you've played with different positions, you've got the sound you like. You just want to make sure now to do a little sound check with yourself. What you want to avoid is overloading the gain, adding too much input volume. So you can see here, I know if you've dug around in the Zoom audio settings, I'm sure many of us have spent time in here. There's a setting under the microphone for input volume and automatically adjust microphone volume. And it's highly recommended to uncheck that because you want to manually set it yourself. All these microphones are going to have different ways of adjusting their input volume. For instance, in that, I can go back here, the MV88 we mentioned in the app, there's the mic gain slider right there that you can use to adjust it. For the Zoom H1N, you get a nice physical knob right in the center there where you can use your mic gain. For something like a USB microphone, like the Audio-Technica, you have to dig around in the sound preferences and find that input volume slider in your operating system. But what you want to do is you want to do a little sound check with yourself. Okay, so you want to find maybe the loudest part of your piece, whatever it is you're playing, and just record about 10 seconds of that, and then listen back. If you have meters that you can use to view the audio, that's great. Ideally, you're not going above like -6, even -10 dB is fine. Because when you see what happens here is I have a waveform where I recorded. And on the left-hand side, I have normal, healthy microphone gain. We set that correctly. And on the right-hand side, I dialed it up to 11, and we're clipping the audio. What there is there's this ceiling in digital audio, and it can't cross that ceiling. So what's going to happen is the audio is going to hit it, and it's just going to flatline, and it's going to create a really ugly, distorted sound. You really want to avoid that, and so you want to do a proper sound check before you embark on your 40-minute recording of Mussorgsky's Pictures on Exhibition or something. So that wraps it up for me. I put a slide here with more information about all these topics, the microphones. I'm going to hand things over to Ed now.
Okay, thanks, Dan. That was awesome. Really cool stuff. So, hi, everybody. My name's Ed Tetreault from the Recording Arts Department here at Peabody. Just a little bit of quick background on what I do at Peabody. I wear several hats there. One of them is the manager of the Recording Arts Department, and I oversee all of the facilities at Peabody. and the kind of the daily operations there. And I also teach a few classes as well. And so one of the things that my world revolves around is fidelity, audio fidelity. You know, the facilities that we have at Peabody, they've been designed and built to be, you know, basically providing like the highest level monitoring environments, recording environments, and you know that's kind of where we live, and that's something that we deal with all the time. We're constantly looking to improve those things. So audio fidelity is an incredibly important part of my day-to-day life. So when faced with the reality that I was going to have to take my classes completely online, I had a little bit of a panic attack, to be quite honest with you, because a lot of the work that we do in teaching recording revolves something that I call really high level technical listening. And in order to do that, the audio fidelity has to be incredibly high. So a lot of the things that I'm teaching students are really kind of intricate details. And, you know, to be quite honest, you know, our students at Peabody spend most of their time really training their ears to listen technically. It's a major part of an audio engineer's career, is being able to listen technically. So one of the things that I found out really quickly was that, well, you know, Dan's suggestions on using, you know, external microphones and things like that will immensely improve the audio over Zoom. I found that the audio quality over Zoom was not sufficient for the teaching that I had to do, which kind of involved, you know, guiding students through mixing, learning about, you know, audio processors such as compressors and equalizers and things like that. In order to really experience those things and be able to teach those, I needed to have a solution that would allow me basically a broader range of fidelity that then Zoom could give me. So I had to look around for a replacement for that. I had to look around for something that would allow me to have really high quality audio between myself and a student. And so what I found was something called a piece of software called Listen To by a company called Audio Movers. And it's a very specific piece of software that's designed to allow you to stream high quality audio from one workstation to either a website in a web browser, which I'll demonstrate shortly, or into someone else's workstation. And what's actually kind of really special about it is that it actually gives you control to tailor the connection, tailor the fidelity that you're sending back and forth to meet the speed of the connection. Because, you know, one of the things that we run into with teaching remotely and teaching online is a lot of times we are very much subject to our connection speeds. So, you know, if you've got a really slow internet connection, that's going to restrict how much you are able to do. And so one of the nice things about this piece of software is that it does allow you to change that and tailor that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen so you can kind of see what I have open here. Is I have Pro Tools set up and with a session. And so what we're looking at here is I've got my Pro Tools session, and I have my Audio Movers plugin open right here. And let me explain a little bit about how this works. So Audio Movers basically have this set up as a subscription. So you log on to the Audio Movers website, which we'll put up a link in the chat. Log in. You can basically get a subscription to it, and that allows you to use this plugin and use their streaming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in here, and essentially what I can do with this plugin is I can basically determine the audio quality that I would like to use to send. Now, before I get a little more in depth here, I'd like to show you what I'm doing with this plugin. So right now I have the plugin basically set up as the last spot on my master fader. So this basically is sending my entire mix out through this plugin. So that's really important. You can also kind of change where that is. There's actually a really lot of possibilities with this. I've used it for remote recording where I can listen back to somebody someone else's workstation, and I can also send as well using TalkBack, so I can talk back and forth to them. So I've done some kind of neat recording sessions remotely using this plugin. Very, very flexible. But let's take a closer look at our plugin here. So I'm logged in, and right here is where we can determine quality. And this is kind of where this software really shines, because this allows you a really wide range of fidelity. So highest range would be PCM 32-bit. So this would be like the native audio that is inside your workstation. So you have the ability to stream the native resolution of your workstation. However, one thing I will say is that really does depend on the connection speeds. So, you know, if you have really fast connection speeds on both ends, this is totally possible. However, if you don't, you're going to take it down. So we have some choices. So we can do 32-bit, 24-bit, 16, and then we get into choices where we actually apply a little bit of compression. So data compression specifically. And what they're using here is the same type of data compression codec that Apple uses for iTunes. So this is actually the Apple audio codec, and you can see we have different bit rates. So for today's demonstration, I'm actually going to take it down because there's so many people. I'm going to keep it down, but the point is you do have the possibility of doing a much higher resolution feed for this. So the other issue that I will mention too is I do have a limit of 40 clients. So I'm going to post the link to this, but only 40 people at a time can listen. We'll see how that works. It's going to be interesting. I've never had that many people on this plugin before, so should be interesting. A couple other things really quickly too. You can determine the amount of latency. Again, what's really nice about this is with a much shorter latency, we could take advantage of really fast connections. So, this would be a great solution if you're on a local area network and you want to get audio to multiple workstations on a local area network. Or if you just have really fast connection speeds, you can have really short latency, or you can make that latency even higher to allow more buffer time to compensate for a slower internet connection. So very, very flexible. It's actually worked really, really well for me. Been very happy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start transmission. So this basically activates the plugin and generates a stream. I'm going to copy a link that's generated. I'm going to put this link into the chat. And let's see here. You guys can just click on this link. And then what I can do from there is, so basically what happens is after you click on that link, what's going to happen is that you're going to open up a web page. Okay. Did it not come up? Should be up there. Oh, hang on one second. Let me do all panelists and attendees. Aha. There we go. Cool. So, essentially what that's going to do is going to basically, and we're up to 40 already. Nice job, guys. That's good. So essentially what that does, that opens a web page and allows you to monitor through a web browser. Now, a couple things that I've found with this too, it can be kind of finicky about which web browser. So Safari, kind of iffy sometimes. Firefox and Chrome are usually pretty good. But let me just do a quick demonstration here. I'm going to play this back and you should get audio playback. So what that allows me to do is now I've got playback, I've got the ability to do high resolution. I've just found that this works a lot better than trying to get audio through Zoom. So I have used this in conjunction with Zoom many times. A lot of times I'll have Zoom set up for communication and use this to get high resolution audio back. And what's cool is I can have it going both ways. So I have students set up where I monitor their workstations and I can hear what they're doing. So it makes a huge, huge difference. So yeah, so I see some people with problems on Safari. That is totally normal. You know, again, with any of these kind of online solutions, you do have to spend some time working out the bugs and get them working. Sure, I'll play just a little bit more for you one more time. Yeah, cool. So, and for those of you guys that are not hearing it, it's very possible that we hit our client limit. So, um, and yeah, so I got a request to try just some different resolutions. Um, sure, I'll do one for you, and then I've got to pass it off to Scott. Um,
Ed, would you be willing to allow maybe the first group to disconnect and have a second group pop on
I'd be happy to
so
do
they
that.
can
Sure,
try it and so and maybe do something with a different resolution as you do it? So
you got it.
if possible, with the first group, make sure you're disconnected, and then the second group, and then go for it to anyone else who wants to try.
Sure, I'll give it a second to kind of change over. I don't think they were expecting to have 350 people listening to their stream, but okay, I'm going to play it back one more time. So this is a higher resolution. So right now, this is a PCM 24-bit. Now, don't panic if you hear pops and clicks in this, because again, your internet connection is actually really key for this. But here we go. Okay, great. So that's an example of the PCM 24-bit, you know, and so I mean this is just a great way to get higher resolution audio across. I will say one other thing, this could be a great solution if you're comfortable with audio workstations. You know, you could connect a microphone to this and actually do kind of live audio back and forth and still have that at high resolutions. So um, definitely something to check out. Now, for those of you guys that tried it and didn't hear anything, you can definitely download a free trial of this on the Audio Movers website. Try it out, give it a shot. It is a great solution for getting high resolution audio. So I'm going to hand it off to Scott Metcalfe now. He's got some really cool stuff to talk about with videos. So
Excellent. Thanks, Ed. And Dan, good stuff. And for those of you that are wondering, Ed's showing Pro Tools here. Maybe you could click off the share, Ed, and I'll switch over in a second. There we go. But of course, if any of you are teaching on GarageBand or Logic or Ableton or any digital workstation, you can do the same thing there. So we used it in our classes in the spring. At least in Logic and Pro Tools, and I think we probably use some more as well in some of the other areas. So Dan did a great job showing you a little bit about the basic acoustics around an enclosed space, so somebody in their living room or in a practice room, and the concerns about mic directivity, how you want to position the microphone, choosing the type of polar pattern. And that could be for a couple of applications. One, it could be connected to your computer or to your tablet or to a phone and being used in real time for lessons, or it could be used for a student in pandemic times and in better times to record themselves either for self-evaluation or to provide their teacher with a kind of demonstration of what they're working on. And that's where my piece comes in here. So what I wanted to show you were a couple of ways that you can take a recorded video or just a recorded audio file and have either that you provide to your student and indicate sort of critiques of what you want to show somebody else is doing well or somebody else not doing well, or have the student record with their phone or whatever device they have available to them their rehearsal of a piece, and give you a chance in non-real time to indicate suggestions and things that they could improve upon. So I'm going to jump over and share my screen here as well. And we're looking at Chrome, so it's just a basic web browser. And the first tool that I'm highlighting here is one that I think a lot of schools are going to have, which is just Microsoft OneDrive. And if a student or somebody shares a video in OneDrive, you're going to be able to play it right within your browser. So this is a Peabody student, Jasper. I would thank So I thank Jasper for letting us use this, and his instructor, Tony Arnold, who helped me with this as well. So let's say that all you have available to you is OneDrive or Google Drive or something along those lines. In OneDrive, there's a tool here where you can get information about whatever the file is. So there's a lot of details that you could list within here. If you keep scrolling down, though, there's a comment section. And what you might consider is if you scroll through here and find something that you want to point out, you can go in here to the activity and put in a comment. So for example, unless I don't want to take the time to play through all of this right now, but if I know in this section there's a little bit of a pitch drift, so I could put so say 23 seconds up to 35 seconds or so. Be careful of your pitch, something to that idea, and go through and just indicate where I want them to be aware of a problem. They can set up to be alerted with a notification when their teachers had a chance to listen to it, or whoever's doing the critique. They can reply to it and say, yeah, I'm having trouble with that. What are your suggestions? So you can create a kind of asynchronous dialogue in the process here. So that's a useful tool. For those that are using Dropbox, you can also do something similar. However, there's another layer of Dropbox that I found recently in doing projects with professional clients, recording clients, where of course you have to pay for another level up tier than the basic free version. But there's a tool that allows you to do similar to what we were just doing in OneDrive, although you can attach the comment to a very specific time. So you can imagine like people that are working on a TV show or a film and sharing clips, and they'll say, ooh, the light's not right here, or this edit's rough, or whatever it might be. We can apply this for a teaching moment. So I went through and had another teacher comment on things that she heard that she would like to change. First of all, she had a nice comment there, and then in each location where she saw a pronunciation issue, or there's the pitch that I was mentioning, decrescendo and the triplets, etc. The student can either play through in real time and see these come up, or they can click on any of these and have the video jump right to that position, so that they can then watch and see what the comment is referring to, and work on improving that. The third tool that I wanted to show you is one that, at least at Hopkins, we have built into our Blackboard system. I think it's a plugin that the university adds on. And that part of it I'm a little bit vague on exactly the details of acquiring the software and incorporating it into Blackboard. But I pulled it up initially to look at as a way of critiquing mix projects and recording projects of students in our recording area. But Tony Arnold, our colleague in the voice department, helped me out here by taking this recording of Jasper and going through and critiquing the sections that she wanted him to work on. So you heard a little bit of this opening already, but I'm going to jump to, you can see Tony's initials here showing up where she's made these video critiques. So let me just play a little bit of the first one here by clicking on it.
From this angle, it's really easy to see your breathing and where there's difficulty. So take a look at the very first 2 breaths that you take, and you'll notice how much you are picking up your whole body.
Okay, so that kind of thing. And throughout here, she's gone and just stopped the video as she was watching it, and she added a comment. So just by clicking the comment wherever you are in the timeline, you're able to comment with either typing in what you want them to see, similar to what I was doing in Dropbox. You can just record audio. You can record yourself on video, as Tony did. If you had a video comment that you recorded somewhere on your phone or something and you wanted to upload it here, you can upload it. And this one I thought was really funny, but I could see how it might be useful. You can actually click here, and I tested this yesterday. VoiceThread, I don't think I mentioned this as VoiceThread, but VoiceThread will actually call you on the phone and say, are you expecting a call or something from VoiceThread? And you click OK, and you can actually record your comments on your phone, which is kind of interesting. So just briefly, I'll jump over here, and you can see I've got Jasper's video recording here, and I have an audio-only recording here of a mixed project from my class. Anytime you want to create one of these, you just create and you add media. So you could drag and drop the video or the audio file right from your desktop, or you can click on this and select what source the audio or video is coming from. And then it just shows up in your in your sort of personal browser of a project that you can go in and then critique. So that's an idea of working something in non-real time. Again, something that I think will be hugely valuable as we're working more remotely, but potentially a really helpful tool to use in normal times where you can kind of dissect somebody's performance and help them work out spots that they're having trouble with. So Abra, I'll pass it back to you.
Great. Thank you all. This has been incredibly helpful. I see that there are a number of questions, not only in the Q&A, but there are some detailed questions that folks have put into the chat. Ed, for example, there were a number of questions around your demonstration, and Scott as well. I'm going to try my best to go through as many of these as we can in the time we have left. But Dan, Scott, and Ed, if you feel that you can juggle 3 things at once, and there are any specific questions you feel like you can type answers to or reply in the chat, that would be super helpful to everybody involved. There are a number of just detailed things that I don't think we're quite going to get to. Scott, I understand that you've participated in a consortium with other music schools regarding a music mode in Zoom that allows for higher quality audio transmission. Could you please explain a little bit more about that and how it might work and how it could improve the student and faculty experience?
Absolutely, and this is very much a fingers crossed moment. But yesterday, a few weeks ago, we got together with a very large consortium of representatives from conservatories around the country, talking about the concerns that we all had about delivering good audio content. We shared some of the tools and techniques we talked about today, and we also discussed things like latency that came up a little bit in Ed's conversation, and very quickly everybody was in consensus that latency is just something that the internet's not ready to deal with, the type of latency that we need for real-time music performance. And a campus, or Internet 2 connected campuses, that's possible, but beyond that, it's tricky. So what we all agreed on was it would be extremely helpful if Zoom, as a company, would make the interface a little bit friendlier. I think many of us feel like we become Zoom experts on how to configure it for the best audio quality and know what to click even if we don't know what we're clicking. So one thing was just looking for a button that says music mode or something to that effect, which is something that Polycom did a number of years ago. So there's a precedent there. But the other is when you click that this is what we're hoping for. And the representatives from Zoom that we talked to yesterday on a Zoom call, we're going to take this to their engineering team, is if there's a way of getting a quality akin to the first layer that Ed started with, actually. Something in the AAC range. They wouldn't be using AAC. They use something called Opus. but it would be something that would be more akin in quality to what you'd expect from like iTunes or Spotify, which, for the high level critical listening that Ed's talking about may not be perfect. But I think for a lot of applications and lessons, it would be extremely helpful. So we were happy with how they responded to our request, and they didn't commit to anything, but all of us came away cautiously optimistic that we might get something.
Great, thank you. I see that Dan is answering some very specific questions about microphones in the chat. Thank you, Dan. That's fantastic. I'll let you keep doing that, and I'll turn to Ed then, just to multitask a little. Ed, what are some examples of practical applications of Listen To? How do you integrate this within Zoom? And is there a way for people to hear what you played over this webinar? Only a few of us got to actually hear it. How might people test it out?
Yeah, so I mean, really, we kind of ran into some of the limitations of it, today with the number of people that we were streaming to, and you saw very quickly we hit our cap of 40 like right away. So my recommendation is to really like download it, experiment with getting a source to a destination. Set up you could even work with GarageBand, have something playing out of GarageBand and pick that up on another laptop or call up a friend or something like that. And hey, see if you can hear this. And, again, whenever we're dealing with internet, it's always kind of a moving target, right? That connection speed is something that we always have to keep in mind. And so basically what we're doing is trying to get the best quality for the situation that we're in. Now, some other applications that are incredibly handy for Listen To is really, like I said, I've done a lot of, since all of this started, I've done a lot of remote sessions. And, probably the first application that I used it for was to work on editing of this major project that I was right in the middle of. And then we got to a situation where we couldn't meet any longer to do this. And so what I ended up doing was working from my home studio, giving my clients a link, a Listen To link to listen to the playback, and then connecting Zoom and using my screen share so that they could see exactly what I was doing. And we were able to go through and finish all of the editing for the entire album in this method. And I was actually very happy with that. So it was a kind of a great application of it. So some other things too, again, I use it for doing remote sessions. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll have somebody have their own setup with their laptop and interface and microphone. I'll have them set up Listen To on their end. I'll be able to monitor what they're recording. And then I also set up Listen To on my end and send my microphone, my talkback microphone back to them. And so we have two-way communication going through Listen To. And we can basically adjust to whatever bandwidth we have. So works pretty well.
Great, thank you. There are a lot of questions about latency issues. What are your thoughts, and I'll open this up to any of you who wish to answer, on programs such as SoundFeed, CleanFeed, and Jamulus? And then a second question around, I'm curious how all of these current latency solutions will be impacted when the 5G infrastructure gets up and running. I hear that that's all going to be completely wireless and reliant on cell tower and satellite connections.
Sure. Again, kind of what I mentioned before, this is always going to be kind of a moving target. One of the things with internet connections is we never really know how many points this signal is passing through, like how many switches, how many different things, what kind of bandwidth is available to the signal. And so, it's really hard to tell. As for the 5G question, I don't know, maybe that's going to be faster, right? Are we going to experience single digit latency, single digit millisecond latency over that? I would say it's probably unlikely, but who knows? Maybe it will be. It's kind of hard to say. I think the key thing is having flexibility. And that's one of the things that I look for. I want flexibility to be able to adjust to whatever situation I'm in. And those other options like CleanFeed, Source Connect Now is another one. They do a very similar thing. And those are also great options. I don't have any experience with Jamulus or the other one you mentioned, but I think they're kind of along the same lines.
Great. Dan, there are any, oh, sorry, Scott, go ahead.
I'd say I did a couple tests with Clean Feed, and that only runs in the Chrome browser, if I remember correctly. But if everyone's got Chrome, that's fine. And I did some extensive testing with Jack Trip, which is a lot more complicated to set up, but some people are attempting it. And in a really good condition at my house, in a really good condition in Western Massachusetts, we still couldn't get it down below 40 milliseconds, which would be like somebody standing 40 feet away from you. So with two engineers on either side who had pretty good idea what we were doing, we couldn't get it any lower than that. So at this point, I don't think we can rely on low latency from a distance.
Thank you. There are a bunch of questions about specific microphones for specific instruments. And Dan, I just wonder if you have some overarching words of advice for people who are investing in microphones and technology as we look for the next semester ahead.
Yeah, it's hard to provide overarching advice for specific microphones. It gets down to, you know, what instrument are you using? There are certain microphones that are really good for certain instruments. That being said, a lot of these recorders like the Zoom H1N or the MV88 or the Audio-Technica, they're just condenser microphones. And for the most part, they're going to work on everything. I've seen some questions in the chat about like ribbon microphones, stereo ribbon microphones. If you have professional microphones like that, you know, a ribbon microphone is very different in quality to the condenser microphones we have listed here. It's a much warmer sound. Some people describe the sound as like velvety. So if you're interested in doing that, you can go down that path. It is a bit more complicated in that you probably have to get an interface, and then you're going to have to figure out how to route audio from that interface into either your DAW or if you're using it in Zoom. I've had some issues there, but it's definitely, if you get into that world, then there's dozens and hundreds of microphones that you could use. Hard to say without talking about specific instruments.
Okay, thank you. There's been a question asked in the Q&A. If a student has to record a flute solo with piano accompaniment from a computer, how do they record it so that you can hear the piano and flute evenly on Zoom? Zoom wants to only pick up the flute part no matter how loud they make the piano audio. The piano audio is the piano is massively soft. Thanks. Any suggestions? And I would say that probably is true of any high-pitched instrument as well, likely.
I bet Ed's got a good answer for this one. I'll chime in quickly and say, though, that one of the requests we made to Zoom that we're slightly less optimistic about, but could happen, is better inter-application audio, so that you could play from another source, like a file, and capture that at the same time. Ed or Dan, do you guys want to talk about the this maybe is a job for Loopback, maybe, Dan?
If you wanted to, you're saying like if you wanted to try sharing computer sound or playing something through iTunes and performing along with it. Rogue Amoeba, I put it at the end of my presentation, they make a lot of really good software. The one we're talking about here is Loopback, which allows you to route software audio in your computer. And so what you can do is you can set up, say, like a virtual audio device, and then I can route my USB microphone, I can route Chrome, I can route my iTunes to that virtual audio device and then use that device in Zoom, which basically means it gives me independent volume control of all those things. And if I want to share sound, I don't have to actually go into Zoom anymore and share computer audio. It'll actually play if I just play it in my iTunes. You can try that for playing along with a track. You can have some success with that. It can be difficult to balance. You're going to have to sound check, you know. Thanks. Here it is. With all these things, you're going to have to do a little bit of a sound check and spend some time. Okay, turn the piano up, turn the piano down. If you don't want, this software can be, it's $99, I believe. So it could be a bit of an investment for students. If students are struggling to play it in the room, you know, they might have to get a speaker, and then they're going to have to work on microphone placement using their polar pattern, really to, you know, move it closer to the speaker, move it away from the speaker, to try and get the best sound they can, the best balance they can there. Positioning really matters a lot, how close it is to the speaker and how close it is to the vocalist.
I would second that. I think that's the simplest setup. If it's playing back on another device in the room and they're playing along with it, just capturing all of it from the microphone is going to be the easiest way to do it.
I know a number of our institutions have recommended specific devices or maybe have information that's outward facing for our colleagues and incoming students as they're looking at equipment to buy. If any of you have those, please don't hesitate to put those into those links into the chat. I think it would be really interesting for the organizations that have done so and curated that list, and we just put Peabody's up there, to just share that out. By no means is this meant to be specific recommendations of what we absolutely advise for every single instrument or in every single situation, but I know that there are some schools who have curated a list of ideas and sort of basic technology for students and faculty to have as we go into the coming year. That said, there are a number of students and potentially faculty who aren't going to be able to afford much of anything. They might only have an iPhone or a basic laptop without speakers. What do you recommend for people in that position? How can teaching faculty advise those students, or what options are available for them?
I'll jump in, I guess. I suppose one thing to check is if there's anything that the school offers. The Peabody, the school library, has some technology that they're making available to students. I think Dan's guidance on real basic acoustics of a room has a lot to do with it. We like to tell our own students in recording that, mic choice is important, but the placement of the microphone in the room to the instrument, what the room sounds like, how reverberant the room is, and if that's appropriate or not. I would argue that that's even more important than the choice of microphone. So if all they can do is use the microphone that's built into the phone, placing it in a location that's closer to them, experimenting. Dan talked about, doing some test recording, putting the mic on a table, maybe bringing it closer to them, or if they have some kind of stand that they could put it on, finding the best room in the house where it's least boomy, so to speak, or it translates well.
Yeah, and I would add to that, when it comes to microphone placement, a question I get a lot of times is, well, what do I listen for? What am I going to be? How do I know where the microphone, if it's in the right place? One of the things that I would recommend listening for is listening to the balance of direct sound to reverberant sound. Okay, that to me is probably the key thing. Matter of fact, I kind of call that the golden secret to recording, but don't tell anybody. Essentially what you need to do is just adjust that placement until you get just the right balance between the direct sound that you're trying to pick up and what the room's contributing. So, if you sounds really echoey and you got your microphone far away, you've got to just kind of bring it closer. And I think that's probably the key thing to listen for. And I agree with Scott. I think that, the type of microphone, well, that does have kind of a definitely effect on the quality of the sound, but it is kind of secondary to where you put the microphone. So very, very important.
That's very helpful. Are there any open source recommendations you have for technology that might assist students or faculty?
I have two I can recommend for video. An open source one called Media Info. It's going to help you out with just identifying the frame rates and sample rates of video that you get, especially when we're doing these projects. Maybe you're in an orchestra and they're doing those like Brady Bunch projects and you're getting like 30 videos. Being able to take in and see what frame rates and sample rates everyone recorded at is really useful. And another is Handbrake, which is a video transcoding open source. So if you need to change a video frame rate or if you need to make it smaller, that's a great solution there.
Dan, would you be willing to put those links into the chat if you can?
Yeah, for sure.
I believe CleanFeed is one that you can use for free, if I'm not mistaken. I think a lot of people also overlook the webcam that's built into the computer or the phone, and the camera app on their phone is going to be able to record video. And on the Mac anyway, QuickTime Player comes installed on your Mac, and you can record movies from your webcam right from there. And If you do have a USB or some other microphone connected, you can go in and tell it that that's the source of your audio. So no extra software needed there.
Great, thank you. Just so that you're all aware, we'll curate a list of these links and upload them alongside the video at the end in the next day or two, so that they're all in one place for all of you, so that you can reference that. I think this is a Scott question, but I'll pass it off to any of you. Do you know if Canvas has a similar capability to the one you were showing in Blackboard? And could you talk a little bit more about the comments feature in Dropbox? Does the student also need a pro Dropbox account in order to see those?
Sure. The first question, I don't think I can answer. One of my colleagues from IT would be better suited for that, or maybe somebody that is online from Peabody knows the answer. And I have not used Canvas specifically. I would assume they have some way of plugging it into Canvas, but I don't know. The second question, sorry.
The second question was, could you talk a little bit more about the comments feature in Dropbox?
So interesting. I put in a call to Dropbox before this so I could find out, and they said, oh yeah, you need a professional version on both sides. And I thought, oh, that's too bad. But when I shared the video with somebody that didn't have the professional feature, they were still able to do it. So it seemed like because the video was housed on my account, which had the professional tier, they were able to comment as though they did as well. So officially Dropbox says you can't, but 2 days ago I did it and it worked fine. So.
Okay, very, very good. I'm trying to find the next most significant set of questions. I'm sorry, we're not going to get to all of the specific instruments in regard to what recommendations that they might have for specific microphones. Here again, I would suggest that each of you maybe reach out to your local recording engineers and ask those very specific questions, and or speak with others in your community about what would make sense. But I was actually very interested to hear what Ed said about, it's really about the placement of the microphone, and that the microphone itself is actually secondary. So Ed, do you want to maybe say anything else about that, or maybe talk about high frequencies versus low frequencies in regard to that?
Yeah, certainly. You know, so I mean, there's several different microphone types out there. You know, we could have dynamic microphones, ribbon microphones, condenser microphones, and you know, really kind of the difference between them is the efficiency with which they work. Okay, and so I would say like any of those types, you can get a good sound with. However, what's going to be different between them is where you place the microphone. So, you know, say using a dynamic microphone, which is going to be a lot less sensitive than something like a condenser, you may find that your microphone placement is going to be a lot closer than what you would with a condenser. And so that's kind of what I mean when it's really about that placement and less about the type of microphone. Could I get a good sound with any of those types? Yeah, I could, but the placement where I put them is going to be different for each one. And so I think that's a really important thing to think about. You know, there's no like set formula and say like, oh, well, if you're recording cello, you need to put the microphone 4.2 feet away. It doesn't work like that, right? There's too many variables around what we're doing. It's going to vary depending on the space we're in. And I would even say like the sound of the cello, the type of player, there's so many variables that you have to think about. My advice is make it sound good. That's what I tell my students. Make it sound good. Do what you have to do to make it sound good. That's the goal.
Great. There's an interesting question here about mic stands. Some of the higher end mics don't come with mic stands, so the school would likely also have to purchase mic stands. Some of the moderate level products use a table mounted arm. Some of the these seem impractical for many students' living situations. I'm leaning towards, I don't know how to pronounce this, El Cheapo USB condenser cardioids, and that come with a tabletop stand and built-in popper stopper.
Yeah.
Thoughts? I wasn't expecting the word El Cheapo. I apologize.
One recommendation I'll make with a mic, I didn't pull one out, but a mic that sits on a tabletop, if you have a mouse pad sitting around, put that mic on top of the mouse pad so that when you bump the table, you don't get a huge thump coming through the microphone. That's a poor man's shock mount. This is mounted to the table as I used it when I was making YouTube videos for my book a while ago. It's not my favorite, but it's okay. There's a lot of $20, $25, $30 mic stands out there that you can buy that, frankly, if we put them in the recording studio at school, they probably wouldn't last more than a couple months. But if somebody's just got it set up in their house and they're pretty much the only one using it and they're not hauling it all over the place, that's going to be fine. So B&H, usually on their main page, has, I think, a $25 or $29 stand. There's a bunch of them out there that, you know, if they're not being moved around a whole lot, they're going to be fine.
Great, thank you. I fear we're absolutely out of time, and I'm sorry for that because I know that so many of you have additional questions. Please know that I am eternally grateful to Scott Metcalfe, Ed Tetreault, and Dan Rorke for their time today and your insights. Again, we will plan to have the recording of this up in the next day or two, along with a list of links and other information for you so that we can address more of these questions as we can. I'd also really like to thank Christina Mansior, Zane Forshee, Patrick Wallen, and Adam Scalici for your support today. Finally, as a reminder, these sessions will continue to occur live every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time through the end of July. A full list of sessions, upcoming presenters, and previous sessions are available on the Peabody Keep Teaching website.